Today on Active Ingredients, I'm joined by Ken Lee, EVP and Head of Biopharma at Impact Global, and someone who's built a career that's anything but conventional. Ken's led teams across the East and West, scaled commercial functions from scratch, and taken risks most wouldn't dare. Sometimes trading certainty for passion and finding the right mentors along the way. He scaled commercial operations from the ground up, led multi-million-dollar launches, and developed a formula for performance that's both precise and deeply human. This episode is about leadership, likability, and the real formula for performance. Ken, how are you doing?
Doing great here. Tom, thanks for having me, and I feel flattered and honored to be here, and thanks for the grandiose introduction.
No worries. No.
That much of a phrase, but it's a real honor for me to be here, being able to share my experience and also learn from other leaders through your podcast. So thanks for having me, and looking forward to our discussion today.
Yeah, love it. And you and I have spoken a few times. You've spoken to quite a few people in my team here as well. And I think you've got a really interesting story. So that's why I really wanted to share it. I think that there's a lot of talk at the moment of people moving from different cultures, from different hemispheres. And I think that you've got a really, really good viewpoint on that. But the way that we normally start this podcast off is by asking the question, what do you think are the three key ingredients of successful leadership and why?
Yeah, for me, I guess the first one is genuine care. I don't mean like surface level, hope you're doing well type of stuff, but I mean actually caring about your people, or at least appearing to be caring about your people, right? So I try to, I have this thing called 70-30 rule, where 70% of my time is mind focus, but 30% should be spent for my teammates, my team members, and other people, just being available. And I've seen so many leaders kind of rush it through, right? One-on-ones or like reviews, quarterly reviews in just like 15 minutes to just kind of check off what's done, what's not done, what needs to be improved, stuff like that. But I think those moments are bold for leaders because you get to hear people's stories, what's really going on in their heads and what they're struggling with. And, it doesn't mean that I can say yes to everything, but I always try to make sure they feel heard and valued, right? So I really try to spend a lot of time here. And the second thing is, that saying, a good leader is smart and a bit lazy.
Yeah.
And I kind of get that. What I mean is that it's about knowing where you're going and picking the right people and overarching the direction to which your team should be pursuing and letting them do their job. I never micromanage, right? I used to, but not anymore. I try to focus on the system, right? Like to set up the KPIs, break them down into actionable items, make them measurable, and then build the right incentives to reward people if they achieve. So if you do that right, the team runs by itself almost. I never touch the team commissions. The 100% goes to the team. I want nothing for myself. That builds real respect. So it looks like you're losing money there, but you keep moving up because people respect you and people really want to be with you. And I guess the last thing, because you mentioned three things, it's taking on a couple of very tough job yourself for the team. And hopefully you're picking something that is really difficult for your team to do and impactful, right? When you get the result. But hopefully this thing is not that difficult for you to do, right? So you strategically pick those tasks that you handle for your team members that, if you show you're very capable, you care for your team. And when you roll up your sleeves and do stuff like that, it builds trust and it builds respect as a leader, right? So they will think, okay, this guy's not just talking. This guy's not just ordering. He's ready to get his feet wet and he's in the trenches with us.
Yeah, rolling your sleeves up. I love that. So you've got the genuine care, a good leader is smart but lazy, but also do the impactful things, show the way, show your team that you're capable.
Absolutely. And maybe I can elaborate just a little bit on the lazy part and the, doing the things that you're capable of. You have to make sure that you have the right system. That incentivizes people, have a measurable and very clearly and detailed KPI, right? So that people, in today's world, people work remote and hybrid setting, right? So there's no way you can breathe down their neck and see what time they come in, what time they leave. So in my opinion, every metric should be quantifiable and measurable. So I think if you do that, you don't need to worry too much about, checking what time they log on, log off. And the third thing that you mentioned, taking on a couple of projects yourself, you shouldn't take too many projects. You should probably take 2 or 3 projects you can do very well for the team, and that matters for the team. So just want to elaborate on that.
But yeah, lovely. Because I think a lot of this will be weaved into the conversation that we're going to have. Because I love your viewpoint on some of those kind of quantitative measures, the granular metrics, and trying to create the systems and incentives to really work with your teams. But before we do that, let's go back. Right, let's give the listeners a bit more of an understanding of Ken. So, when you were at, school, college, university, did you think that you were destined for a career in the life sciences?
No, not at all. Regardless of what you may think of me looking at me right now, speaking to the public, I was that quiet, pale-faced, nice kid in school, always just studying up, helping people. Always following the rules, never talk back, just buried in books, right? So, but a lot of things changed when I actually moved to the States at the age of 16 from Korea. And then, I had to be myself with my brother and under the loving care of my aunt and uncle. But my parents were here and all of my other family members were back in Korea. So I really had to basically survive and make my case, right? So I became more active. Came from an extreme introvert to an extrovert, right? So a huge change in my personality. At Berkeley, I started out as a pre-med because I initially wanted to become a doctor, but I never became one. So I'm sitting here. I really thought I'd become a doctor because that's something, my dad is a physician, right? So I thought I would naturally follow his path and become a doctor without thinking too much about that. But yeah, it didn't happen, and maybe for the best. And I remember pushing myself in ridiculous ways, right? Like staying up like 60 hours straight to prep for finals. No, that's not smart. But hey, I thought I was hacking life, right? Or going on a 3-day apples diet. Had me lose like 5 kilos in like 3 days, right? So I was like crazy kid, very extrovert, doing everything I could, extremely with my life, not very smart. But, that also made me a good scientist, right? Experimenting and just trying with different things. So when I graduated, I joined a company called BioFocus, which is a contract research company that, analyzes millions of compounds for NIH and the farms in biotech. So that was the beginning of my career as a researcher, not businessman like myself right now.
Yeah. So, and you were working at this point in the US?
Yes, initially, correct.
Yeah. Great. So when do you feel, it seems as though you've kind of walked off that plane and gone, right, I need to leave the introvert back in Korea, and I need to start to change how I present myself in the land of opportunity, as they call it.
Yeah, I know. There was a really tough decision, as you can imagine. Why would I give up everything I have here, my career, the higher pay compared to Asia, and the reputation of the company, the name value. So there was a lot of giving up, but I guess I became way too much of an extrovert than I thought I would become. And, just working in a very fixed lab setting was not my favorite type of way of working when I, look at myself like 20, 30 years from now. So I wanted to do a job that makes me interact more with people, and they can make a real impact. So I wanted to get into business. So I wanted to get into business development, and I was working at a company called Gilead. And of course, it's a big company, very competitive, and there are a lot of other more qualified people than myself. So that opportunity wouldn't come to me easily, right? But one of the companies I worked for, the previous CEO of the company, recommended me to a company called Finex in Korea.
Yep.
And the Finex called, the third time they called me, I decided to go back to Korea to lead a BD team there. So I went from a researcher to a BD team leader, right, at the age of 29, which made me the youngest manager in the company. So that, however, that involves cutting my salary in half, right, and also going from 40-hour per week type of schedule for 100-hour week per week. For 4 years, I did that for 4 years. So that was a really difficult change to make. But at the same time, it really helped me grow as a person. So let me kind of stop here. But one thing I can tell you here is that everybody thought I was stupid, right? People questioned me, why would you make that type of move? Why would you give up everything you have here, your money and your, the company name and everything? But that turned out to be the best decision ever in my life.
Yeah. And I really want to unpack that one. So, as you said, you're thriving in the US. You've got your education. You started working for some really cool companies, Gilead, Biomarin, etc. But then it's like, in order to fulfill yourself professionally, take a bit of a gamble. So you've gambled twice, literally. You've gone from working in science to working in business development. You've gone from working in the US back to Korea. And as you said, you cut your salary in half.
Yep.
Let's unpack that a little bit more. So, what kind of drove you there? Do you think it was passion and purpose over the finances?
Yeah, I think it was more about my passion. I had a personal motto at the time, challenge over stability, happiness over money. And, that was when I was in my 20s. I set that motto, and I completely followed that rule of my life that I set up for myself. And that changed a little bit because now I'm a married man, and I have a long career here. So, not so much nowadays as before, but that was my passion and my motto back in the day. So I took the chance, and actually my younger brother, he told me, hey, if things don't work out in Korea, you can come back to the U.S. anytime. You're a U.S. citizen, and you have a good education here. You have good, Trevor could have working for a, pretty high-name company. So, he really encouraged me and empowered me to make this decision. And yeah, I thought to myself, hey, if this thing doesn't work out within like half a year or a year, I would come back, right? But things started working out much better than I thought, thanks to all the mentors and the leaders and the teammates that I got to work with. And the positioning of the company was very unique, right, for me to drive global business for the company. So that gave me a pretty good reputation in the field. Got me recruited by other big firms, so that did all the wonders in my life.
And that moment when you went back, and as you said, you were a 29-year-old leader, who's probably doubling the amount of work they're undertaking on a weekly basis, and relocating lots and lots of change. Yep. Was this the moment that you felt like a leader for the first time?
In the beginning, yes, but in the middle of it, I felt like I was not a good leader at all. So the first real leadership gig was Finex, right? When I moved to Korea, and I was 29, the youngest manager at the time at the company, and I thought I was the hot stuff, right? I studied abroad, worked for big names, and but wow, I was clueless, right? I thought leadership meant being served, right? And not serving others. And I had to learn that, right? And I'm still thankful to the team because they taught me so much. And there were some things that I was missing in my life. Things like sacrifice, humility, collaboration, selflessness. And now I tell my teammates that to be selfless is to be the most selfish, right? But all these things I learned through working 100 hours a week because, I thought I could get, whatever you guys can get done within 40 hours in like 25 hours. And I could leave by 5 p.m., right? But that is not the core of being successful. Being successful is to be able to be available for your team leaders, even when you're done with your work, and taking them out to encourage them and, really being a servant for your team is to become a leader, right? So ever since then, I became a much improved person. Not a great person still, but, much improved than the very immature little research guy back in, 2005, right? So, a big change and, happy that I went through that time, the wilderness.
Yeah, because it's very interesting that it seems like the catalyst of change here has been you learning from other leaders. Was there any advice? Because I know that you had a really good time back in Korea, both at Binex and then also at Samsung. Were there leaders or were there bits of advice that you've taken in that time and still use to this day?
Yeah. That I can tell you one thing that is most important and resonates in my mind all the time. Think in other people's shoes. If you do that, you will be successful as a leader, as a husband, as a friend, whether it be your career, your life, you will be liked and respected, I think. And even in business development, if you want to sell something to your client, if you want to understand them, you want to know and truly understand what's in their heart, right? So before you go to a meeting, rather than just thinking about your own agenda, hey, I'm going to negotiate the price, the timeline, the GMP standard, the track record, whatever you have in your agenda, you have to talk about that. But before you do that, think about what they truly need from you. Is that really what you're offering on your agenda that they need, right? So I think that's the first principle of becoming a great BD and a great leader and great friend, great whatever.
Yeah, empathy, sympathy, compassion, all of those kind of things are required. But I think, as you said, when you're sometimes in a highly pressurized commercial environment, the dollars, the deals are very important. And sometimes that can kind of sidetrack from the human aspect. That's the buying emotion. That's the thing for me. I think if you can, as you said, put yourself in somebody else's shoes, that's the key.
Absolutely. I fully agree with that. And we want to be their consultant rather than their boss or their salesperson. Nobody likes boss, nobody likes salesperson. But everybody likes friend, everybody likes an advocate, right? So you want to become that first. So whether there's a business or not, you want to be a leaning shoulder for them, right? So I think that's my principle, and that's how I try to make myself as a better leader every day.
Yeah. And then your career, so after a good period of time, 7-8 years back in Korea, you were then given the opportunity to totally change things up again. So let's dive into that. What happened next?
Oh yeah, so actually a vice president, executive vice president at Samsung Bioepis, who was in R&D, I respect him so much. His name is Brian Min. He was appointed as the CEO of Jansprit ProBio, a newly launched CDMO division for the globally renowned Jansprit CRO company. And then he brought me over to the U.S., the America continent head, right? Generally, the commercial division. Well, initially, let me scratch that. He initially brought me over as the head of business development to launch the CDMO business arm for Jansprit in the U.S. and to build it up, right? Gradually in a few years. And I launched it back in 2019 in New Jersey. And then by the end of the year, we had $5 million sales. And then by the time I graduated from Jasper to FK, we hit 33 million. So about 7 times growth within 3.5 years. So very, very sharp growth. But anyway, going back to your question about going back to the US, wow, what a shift, right? I mean, in the US, I was only working there as a very junior level researcher and a QA guy, right? Never as a business person. So this time I was going back as a leader, not a follower, right? So I had to make a lot of changes to myself. And when I arrived, 4 months later, COVID-19 pandemic happened. So I had to shift myself from a very usual, 9 to 5 office type of work to completely, working remotely from home. And I had to work with that, not just with myself, but with my team members, because they're all over the American continent. I had an employee in Canada. I had somebody in California. I had somebody in Minnesota. I had somebody in New Jersey. And as for Florida, you name it, right? So there was no way I could control or, kind of manage in terms of hour, right? So I had to shift my management style. And then, I had to change myself, right? How I work and how I manage the team. So that's when I implemented very carefully a very detailed KPI. And everything needs to be quantitative, needs to be measurable, needs to be fair, and needs to be good for the people, right? The people need to be incentivized by that, right? And there were a lot of difficulties in setting this up as well, because if you are a very seasoned BD professional, you can follow this type of KPI and make some type of quantitative achievements, right? That can be rewarded. But if you are a new BD fresh out of college, or you are a quality or researcher like myself that are trying to get into the BD field, it needs time for you to get learning and to become a more seasoned professional, right? So I divided the KPI into the performance part and the effort part, right? To be fair and to make sure that people who are in the learning phase can also get incentivized for their good effort, right? So this type of approach, in conjunction with being more flexible with, I guess their working hours, right? I mean, I never checked what time they log in, what time they log off. I just checked those KPI and the metric, and people just, were very incentivized, and they were very passionate and zealous to get this done. And I could see that I learned myself, working 100 hours a week like I did before is not a golden rule anymore, right? And the world is changing, and we have to adapt to the change.
Yeah. So before we get into your commercial leadership magic formula, because I really like some of that aspect, let's set the tone for some of the listeners that may not understand how the working week looks in Korea, as an example. So, you've come back to the US, COVID, home working, total autonomy. What was the scenario for the 7 years prior to that in Korea? What was the working model like? Just so the listeners can start to see how different the two working worlds are.
Yeah. In fact, in Korea, especially at Binance, I started at 8 a.m. Usually worked until 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. And I do that from Monday until Friday every day. And on Saturday, I can sleep in a little bit and come to work at 9 or 10 a.m. And I get my lunch and my dinner, and then, go home at 7 p.m. On Sunday, I'm Christian, so I go to church in the morning. So after church, I go back to the office in the afternoon and work until about 7, 8 a.m., about same time as Saturday. That adds up to about 100 hours. So that was my work week. And at the same time, I traveled to over 25 countries at the time at Binance, because the whole global business development team effort was created with me joining the company. Before that, the company was very domestic, right? With me joining the company made a lot of trips. I closed so many licensing and C-cable deals back at the time. Turkey, Russia, Japan, Brazil, you name it, right? So a lot of travel involved as well. But when I was here at the office, I worked at 100-hour week. At Samsung, which is also notorious for its working hour back then, I felt things were so much easier actually at Samsung compared to Bionex. Samsung worked me about 70 hours a week or 80 at most, right? So yeah, I still come in every weekend, but it's not like 1 a.m. I work until maybe at 10 p.m. On average. And when we go out for, nice beer or something like that, I do come home at like 2 or 3 a.m. But, that was not every day, right? But the working dynamic in Korea changed a lot since I was there, right? And now it's limited to legally 52 hours a week. So now things are much more different. So I guess I was unlucky to live through the toughest time in terms of a work schedule. But I also consider myself lucky to have the bandwidth, right? Because I went from the other extreme to the other, right? So that really enabled me to work in any setting possible. And, the work at Transcript back in the U.S. really opened my eyes up to a completely different spectrum of, the working style. And, that helped me that it's not the work hour. It's about people's happiness, people's incentive, and a measurable and very well-defined KPI that drive people naturally, right? And if you can get done within 4 hours, but other people can get done in like 8 hours, hey, use the time for your family, for your hobby, to make yourself happy. And if you can sit down tomorrow at your table happier and more energized, I mean, they're happier, they can get more stuff done, and I'm happier too, right? But of course, if people underperform and they are less efficient, that they have to work like 10, 11 hours a day to hit that same metric, right? So it's all about the performance of the metric rather than how much time people work. So that people can be rewarded for their efficiency as well, not by hours.
Yeah, I love it. Because it's really interesting to find out more about what it was like in those, 52 hours in Korea, working that 100-hour, 80-hour week in a location as well, more often than not. If you weren't traveling, then you were kind of bound to an office. Really interesting. And was that more societal because everybody else was doing it, or was it like something that you thought that you had to do personally to get the results that you needed?
Yeah, so it was societal. So everybody, pretty much almost everybody in Korea worked on site in the office during whole entire COVID-19 time. Believe it or not, everybody did that. Maybe with an exception of a few mid to small-sized companies, all the major companies kind of kept up with the on-site working schedule. So it was not by choice. It was not by coercion. It was more society that everybody else is doing it. So I just kind of went with the flow, and that's respectable and respected in Asian culture, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Really interesting. So then you've moved to the US. As you said, COVID hit. Everybody was working from home. You then needed to think differently to ensure that you could get your team brought into the work that they were undertaking, but also that they were achieving, striving, contributing. So let's talk more about that commercial leadership formula, because it seems as though the kind of granular metrics, the quantitative measures have been put in place, but then you're giving people lots of freedom and autonomy. So let's talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah. So for example, let me answer your first question about the metrics and KPI first. Many companies out there only set their KPI on the very conspicuous financial outcome like revenue, profit, cost, right? But there are a lot of, if you think about the entire business cycle, there's a lot of key factors that drive those financial results at the end, right? For example, if you are working at a CDMO and trying to close a deal, if you close one deal, this person closed one deal, the other person closed two deals, then, naturally the person B gets double the incentive than the first one because they closed two deals. But it's not as simple as that. In order to get to that closed deal, you need to work with a certain number of negotiated agreements, right? So how many negotiated agreements can you get to? In order to get to the negotiable agreement, how many proposals are you sending out to how many customers? And in order to send out the proposal, how many qualified leads are you actively and timely and diligently following up with, right? So everything can be measurable in that sense, right? If you look at the entire sales cycle and the business cycle, right? So you need to be very strategic and systematic in kind of setting this up, and it has to make sense. So even if somebody gets 0 at the end of the day, if they have reached out to this many clients and generated enough proposal and made enough effort to negotiate different agreements, they still get credit, right? So I think this is a main pitfall that many other companies fail to see. They only base everything on how much revenue growth compared to the last year, how much profit growth compared to the last year. So I advise, if I may advise, I think setting up KPI in a way that is broken down into a cycle rather than the end result. It's very important. And I'm sorry, what was your second question again?
So, yeah, it's about how do you then set those measures, but then how do you give people the freedom within that framework? How do you create that environment so that they've got the autonomy and the space to walk into?
Oh, yeah. So I do have, I set up 3 different types of meetings, right? While I don't breathe down their neck daily, I never do that. I set up weekly leadership meeting with my regional leaders, right? To report to me critical, topics and the critical deals that they're working on. And if there's anything I solve from my level, and those leaders at their own regional meetings with their leadership team, with their team members, I think that's more frequent. I think twice a week. And, they can talk about most of the stuff that can be handled by the leaders there. And then if that cannot be solved, that comes to me. And I had one monthly full house meeting where everybody joins the meeting along with the leaders and their team members to listen directly from me and to talk directly to me, right? Where they can voice their concerns or, talk about, where I can help and stuff like that. So usually during this type of discussion, you can instantly tell what type of trouble that they're going through, where I can help, how much work that they're doing, because they go through the other type of opportunities that they're working on. And I do quarterly one-on-one with everybody, right? So 4 times a year, where based on their very well-defined and detailed KPI, how they're performing, and this is a great chance again for you to shine as a leader, to really show that you care for the people, and also listen to what you can do for that, right? So this was how I kind of managed the type of the depth and the width of work that they're doing, not by the hour, right? So as long as you can manage that and the communication is happening constantly at the right interval, I think things could be managed.
Yeah, because that kind of, if you could set up your systems and your, as you said, your formula correctly, you don't need to breathe down anybody's necks. Yeah. And also that kind of micro, we've all been led by micromanagers in our time. Sometimes it's good and what you need in your early years. Sometimes it's definitely not what people want or need, and actually it's very destructive. So to be able to have the confidence in your systemization that you could just leave people to it must be quite rewarding.
Yeah, it was very rewarding. And in a way, I'm ashamed to say that I had no choice, because otherwise people would leave to a different company. And, our company could never pay the employee the way, like giants like Lonza or Samsung could pay them, right? So we kind of had to, it was not exactly by my choice, but I kind of had to do that, right? To keep people happy, motivated, and really passionate about, driving our business, right? So it was a compromise that I made to the team and myself, and it worked wonders, right? I didn't make it happened by choice, but it was by accident, but by COVID-19. But at the end of the day, it became more of a blessing than anything else. So I feel very good about that. And in a way, I'm very proud and thankful to my team during the time, because everybody, quote unquote, graduated to very, very nice companies. So all the major companies recruited every single of my team member. So they became warriors in the field, right? Because they were managing very systematically their work, and they were achieving. And we went from really zero to $33 million in 3.5 years. So we were actually a catalyst for many of the other CDMOs to come into the field. We were a China-based manufacturer, and a lot of the Chinese CDMO jumped in looking at our success. But not everybody can manage the way we could have, right? So it was a very blessed time, and I feel very lucky to have been part of the process.
And you and I have spoken before at length about forgive me, I think you called it leadership likability.
Oh, yeah.
So can we talk about that a little bit more? Because you've set the tone. You've got a very good understanding of the Eastern and Western hemispheres. You've got a good understanding Korean, US businesses, then working for Chinese CDMOs in the US. I mean, it's a fantastic, foundation that a lot of people will be able to learn from in today's discussion. But that leadership likability really piqued my interest when we spoke about it.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things I can talk about here. Number one is that I think I kind of covered as part of the first question, where what I think to be the three key attributes for a successful leader. Number one is you have to genuinely care for your people, right? And people are the work is done by people, not by system, not by computer. It's done by people. The people have to like you, and people have to be one team, right? So if the leader can show that, the leader really cares for the team success, and when the team succeeds, everybody in the team succeeds, and when somebody in the team succeeds, it also helps others succeed in the team. If you set up that incentive, I can also talk another day about incentive for so many hours. But if you set it up the right way, people really push each other, people encourage each other, people generate leads, and they share to each other, right? So I think this type of genuine care within the team. And number two is sharing as much as you can. Of course, you shouldn't share everything about the company to your team members. You have to be very diplomatic, and you have to be very discerning about what to share and what not to share. But sharing, especially the company's vision, from the big picture, where we are going, what we want to achieve, what we have in store for each person, and the reason why I created this type of weekly leadership meeting and the monthly full house meeting is for me to communicate that type of stuff. And unfortunately, not many leaders care to do that, and they would rather just evaluate people by the numbers and the results, right? But being able to share that is pretty cool. And number three, I think I also talked about, kind of taking on the most difficult task for the team, right? As a leader, you want to handle the biggest giant, the monster, right? And you have to be confident that you can beat this monster. Otherwise, you shouldn't volunteer, right? So make sure you do that. And if I could add one more thing, be very, very fair. And I know that being fair is never completely feasible, right? In today's world, how can you be 100% fair? But at least you have to try to be fair, or at least appear to be fair, right? So that people are not, suspicious about your favoritism, and also, they are being valued individually, right? So I think those are some of the traits that make you liked as a leader.
Yeah, and it's not just about trying to be everybody's friend, because that can be counterproductive. If you can't have the real conversations with people, but as you said earlier, if you're really trying to understand them, understand their goals, their why, their purpose, you're a fair leader with the right level of empathy, putting yourself in their shoes with genuine care. All of these things just sound like a recipe for, fantastic leadership.
Absolutely, absolutely. When I first joined Transcript ProBio, I took on a very difficult negotiation with a global company that is listed in NASDAQ, and we were trying to license out our molecule to them. And there was a lot of conflict about how much to pay, basically, and who's accountable and responsible for what. And because I had been in licensing space for a very long time, I took that charge, and then I finalized the deal for the first year, which gave us millions of dollars. And the second year, I took on the first project for an antivirus manufacturing, GMP manufacturing project for Janssen Bio. And that was the first ever US-based GMP viral vector project. I took that on myself because I know I could close that project with my my background. And the guy that was working with me, but my counterpart was a Korean American, right? So I knew I could leverage that. So I brought a lot from my bag, right? In addition to what people could do from their backpack, right? So, but this is not something that not many people within that company could have done, right? But by the same token, a lot of the deals that we have done as a team is something that I myself could not have done without my teammates, right? So, being very discerning and diplomatic about what you take for the team is very, very important.
Yeah, and it seems like you create really connected teams. Some that work 100 hours a week, some that can work remotely and do the right stuff with the right amount of time and tools that they've got. I think it's, testament to the way that you've set up your formula, set up your teams, and set up that environment for success. Now, what I also really like is that you've quite clearly got a passion for taking risks and, taking opportunities as they're created. What I'm interested to understand next, though, is what do you think of the future of, I don't know, the CDMO industry or the leadership within that space, within the commercial world? Should we spend a little bit of time now before we end looking forwards?
Yeah, I think going forwards, I think it may be a little bit of a difficult time for the world and the industry in the way that things are changing way too rapidly, and we're seeing nothing but bad news about everything, right? And biotechs are not getting enough funding. Even large pharma companies are laying off people. AI is replacing human. So if I could have a magic wand, right, I could wield it and make sure that biotechs with sound business and sound science and business practice could have a sustainable business for a very long time, and people could come back to our workforce and the workplace, and but it's a very difficult time, and if I have one advice, I guess, for people is to basically just follow their heart, because I don't think there's any one specific advice that can, that I can give that can, magically create a job or magically create a company or anything like that. But I would always go for, your passion, because maybe you can scratch this. But I think in the distant future, we may live in a world where a job is optional, right? And a lot of the people may choose to work or choose not to work, and a lot of the other people may live on some kind of support from the government and support from the local government. So just follow your passion, and I think that may be the best bet, because there are a lot of YouTubers right now and a lot of people on the Instagram that have their own contents, right? So I think this type of future may also come to biotech and pharma as well, where people create breakthroughs from their labs and from their university, and then they kind of license it out to big pharmas, right? To create a fortune. So just be creative and follow your heart. I think that's one thing I would say. Maybe this is a bit of a controversial issue, so maybe you can scratch this.
No, that's okay. So follow your heart, and then maybe occasionally have the bravery to cut your salary in half and move across the world.
Yeah, so now maybe, okay, start recording from now. Yeah, so on taking risk, I think, so let me just say this one thing. taking risk is actually safer than taking no risk. And I would always say that even for a leader, making any decision is better than making no decision, right? And as long as you are humble and agile and smart enough to admit that if something goes wrong, hey, I've done this wrong. Be honest, be candid, right? And you can fix it, right? But if you just kind of sit on it and do nothing about it, you are setting yourself for failure for sure, right? So, especially for those decisions that can be repeated, make those decisions quickly, right? So I think that's one thing for the leader in terms of risk. And in terms of job-related risk, I have seen more companies that penalize people for not taking a responsibility than people taking responsibility and not delivery, right? Because companies want people who have the sense of ownership for the company and who are willing to raise up their hand. Of course, they shouldn't risk the company's fortune or the company's reputation. They shouldn't tarnish that. But within your RAM of capability, if you take risks, more often than not, you will get noticed by more people and you'll be recognized for the small results that were produced that wouldn't have been produced if nobody volunteered anyhow, right? So I would say that if you are torn between whether to take the job or not, unless you are super busy and unless your job needs 100% focus from you and is taking so much of your time, I would say take the risk, right? And see what happens. And if you are following all of the things that many of the leaders on this podcast shared, and hopefully what I shared today, collaboration and sharing and caring, people will help you and you would help them as well. So I took the risk, and luckily for me, it worked out every single time until now, right? So I would just encourage people, hey, you probably have more capability and more relationship building capacity than you think you have.
Yeah, if you're that introvert Ken back at college and university, take the risk, go for it. I think that version of you would be looking at the future version of you, absolutely surprised and overwhelmed with how many chances you've taken and how good that career has been.
Absolutely, and even from besides the personality you have so well described, from going from your introvert to extrovert, moving from function to function, I started as a researcher, associate scientist, to GXP compliance specialist, to a business development. And I thought that my career was a little bit, wreck, right? And it was kind of, shaking a little bit. But in retrospect, all this research and the quality type of experiences helped me so much in me doing my BD job, because the BDs are talking to not BDs. They usually talk to, like a C-level people. They usually talk to scientists to come up with ideas and proposals. So you have to understand where they're coming from. And if you know where they're coming from their shoes, back to my point about, thinking other people's shoes, it helps you so much. So, take the risk, and then you will only help people more and open up more possibilities and opportunities for you, right? As long as you're focused and you have a good story and you are dedicated to what you're doing and you are, structured, somewhat systematic and structured in what you really want to do, in pursuing those risks.
Love it. Ken, what a fantastic conversation. I think there's been some absolute golden nuggets in here, especially when we're looking at, understanding the difference between working cultures, both from introvert to extrovert, Western Hemisphere, Eastern Hemisphere, working from science, R&D, quality into the commercial world, lots of different paradoxes, but it's been an absolutely fantastic conversation. I hope you've enjoyed it.
I have enjoyed it so much. Thank you for this podcast. Again, it's been an honor and pleasure to be with you today.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.